Terror Stalks the Class Reunion by Mary Higgins Clark, performed by Sally Kirkland.
He watched Kay from the corner of his eye. For these 3 days, he'd been careful to stay away from her, never to be caught in a group picture with her. It hadn't been difficult. Nearly 600 alumni had turned out for this reunion. For 3 days, he'd had his nerves twisted as they launched into the tiresome memories of silly school kid nonsense from their days together at Garden State High in Passaic County, New Jersey. Kay had finished eating a hot dog. She must have felt something on her lip because she brushed it with her fingertip, then laughed and poked the fingertip in her mouth. Tonight he would hold those fingers in his own hands. He was standing at the edge of a group. He knew that the weight he had lost in these 8 years, the beard he had grown, the contact lenses instead of the heavy glasses, the bald spot under his thinning hair, had changed his appearance a lot more than most of the students. But some things didn't change. Not one person had come up to him and said, "Donnie, great to see you." If anyone had recognized him, they'd rushed past, just like the old days. He could see again the school cafeteria when he'd bring the sandwich in a paper towel and go from table to table. "Sorry, Donnie," they'd mumble. "No room." Finally, he'd come to the point where he'd sneak into the fire escape stairs and eat his lunch there. But now he was glad that in these 3 days no one had slapped his back or clasped his arm or yelled, "Great to see you." He'd been able to drift on the edges of groups, able to watch Kay, able to plan what he would do. In exactly 1/2 hour more, she would belong to him. "What class were you?" For a moment he wasn't sure that the voice was questioning him. Kay was sipping a soda. She was talking to a student who had graduated in Donnie's class, Virginia something or other. Kay's honey-colored hair was brighter than he'd remembered, but she lived in Phoenix now. Maybe the sun had streaked it. She'd cut it so that it curled around her face. It used to lie on her shoulders. Maybe he'd make her let it grow again. "Kay, let your hair grow. Your husband's laying down the law." He'd be teasing, but he'd mean it. What was the stupid question this stupid person had asked? Oh, the year he graduated. He turned. Now he recognized the man, the new principal. He'd made the opening remarks on Tuesday. "I graduated 8 years ago," Donnie said. "That's why I didn't know you. I've just been here 4 years. I'm Jean Pearson." "Donnie Rubel," he mumbled. "It's been a fantastic 3 days," Pearson said. "Terrific attendance, great school spirit. At a college, you'd expect it. But high school, it's wonderful." Donnie nodded. He blinked and made it seem that he was moving, but the sun was in his eyes. He could see that Kay was shaking hands with people. She was going to leave. "Where do you live now?" Pearson seemed determined to keep up the conversation. "About 30 miles from here." To forestall any more questions, Donnie said hurriedly, "I have my own fix-it business. My van is my workshop. Go anywhere up to an hour's drive to do repairs. Well, good to meet you, Mr. Pearson." "Say, maybe you'd want to talk at our career day. Kids need to know there are alternatives to college." Donnie raised one hand as though he hadn't heard. "Gotta run. Some of the guys from my class and I are pushing on to dinner." He didn't give Pearson a chance to answer. Instead, he began to skirt the picnic area. He'd dressed carefully. Khaki slacks, a blue polo shirt. Half the guys here had on practically the same thing. He'd wanted to blend into the crowd, be as inconspicuous as he'd been conspicuous in the years he'd spent in this school. The only kid in the class who wore an overcoat when everyone else had a school jacket. Kay was walking through the grove of trees that separated the picnic area from the parking lot. The school adjoined the county park, so ideal for the reunion. And so ideal for Donnie. He caught up with her just as she opened her car door. "Miss Wesley," he said. "I mean, Mrs. Crandall." She looked startled. He knew that in a minute the parking lot would be crowded. He'd have to hurry. "I'm Donnie Rubel," he said. "I guess you don't recognize me." She looked unsure. Then that smile that he'd envisioned so many times lying awake at night began to form. "Donnie, how good to see you. You look so different. Have you been here long? How come I haven't seen you? Just made it here, he explained. You're the only one I wanted to see. Where are you staying? He already knew. The Garden View Motel on Route 80. That's perfect, he said when she answered. A car is picking me up there in half an hour. I cabbed over. Is there any chance you could drop me? It would give us a chance to talk. Did she suspect something? Was she remembering that last night when she told him she wasn't coming back next term, that she was going to be married, and he'd started to cry? She hesitated, then said, Of course, Donnie. It will be good to catch up. Hop in. He managed to bend down and yank his shoelace open as he hurried around to the passenger side. When he got into the car, he leaned over and made a big thing of tightening the shoelace. Anyone who noticed the car at all would swear Kay had left the picnic area alone. Kay drove swiftly. She tried to push down her faint irritation at the presence of the young man beside her. Mike would be home from New York in an hour, and after the way she'd been so rotten to him on the phone last night, she was desperately anxious to straighten things out between them. This school reunion had been good for her. It had been fun to see the teachers she'd worked with the 2 years she'd taught there, fun to catch up with her students. She loved teaching. That was one of the problems between her and Mike. His job of setting up new plants for his company meant they never stayed any place more than a year. 12 moves in 8 years. She'd told him when he'd left her at the motel to tell the company that he wanted a permanent assignment. That sounds like an ultimatum, Kay, he'd told her. Maybe it is, Mike, she'd answered. I want roots. I want to have a baby. I want to be in a place long enough that eventually I can get back into teaching. I can't keep moving like this. I just can't. Last night, he'd started to tell her that the company had promised him a partnership and a permanent spot in the New York office if he would just do one more on-location job. She'd hung up on him. She was so concerned with her own thoughts that she didn't notice the silence of her passenger until he announced, Your husband's been at a company meeting in New York. He's due back tonight. How did you know? Kay looked quickly at the impassive profile of Donnie Rubel, then glued her eyes to the road. I talk to people who talk to you. I thought you just got to the picnic. You thought that. That's not what I said. The vent was blowing cool air into the car. Kay's skin went suddenly cold, as though the pleasant June evening had chilled. They were less than a mile from the motel. Her foot went down on the accelerator. Something warned her not to ask questions. Worked out so well, she said. My husband had a business meeting in New York. I got the notice about the reunion, and I read the alumni news, Donnie Rubel told her. It said, Garden State High's favorite teacher to come to reunion. That was generous. Kay tried to laugh. You didn't recognize me. Donnie sounded pleased. But I bet you didn't forget you went to the prom with me. She'd taught English in choir. The guidance counselor, Marion Martin, had suggested that Donnie Rubel join the choir. He's one of the saddest kids I've ever seen, she told Kay. He's a klutz at sports, he has no friends. I'm sure he's bright, but he just gets by academically, and God knows the poor kid was behind the gate when looks were given out. If we can get him in an activity where he might make friends. She remembered his earnest efforts, the snickers of the others in the group until one day when Donnie was out, she'd talk to them. I have news for you guys. I think you're rotten. They'd let up on him, at least during choir. After the spring concert, he used to drop in to talk with her. That was when she learned he wasn't going to the prom. He'd invited 3 girls, and they all turned him down. On impulse, she suggested that he come anyhow and sit with her at dinner. I'm one of the chaperones, Kay had said. It will be nice to have you with me. Uneasily, she remembered how Donnie had started to cry at the end of the evening. The motel sign was on the right. She chose not to notice that Donnie's hand had moved and was brushing her leg. Remember at the prom I asked if I could see you over the summer? You told me you were getting married and moving away. You'd lived in a lot of places. I've tried to find you. You have? Kay tried not to sound too nervous. Yes. I looked you up in Chicago 2 years ago, but by then you'd moved to San Francisco. I'm sorry, I missed you. Do you like to move around so much? Now his hand was resting on her knee. Hey, fellow, that's my knee. She tried to sound amused. I know it. You're really sick of moving around so much, aren't you? You don't have to anymore. Kay glanced at Donnie. The heavy, dark sunglasses covered his eyes and half his face, but his mouth was pursed and partly open. He was exhaling through it now, an almost soundless whistling note that had an eerie echo. "Drive to the end of the lot and turn left behind the main building," he told her. "I'll show you where to park." His hand tightened on her knee. She felt, before she saw, the gun that he pressed against her side. "I'll use it, you know," he whispered. This couldn't be happening. She should never have given him a ride. Her hands trembled as she turned the wheel in obedience to his directions. There was a cold chill in the pit of her stomach. Should she try to attract attention, to crash the car? She heard the click of the safety catch on the gun. "Don't try anything, Kay. There's 6 bullets in this gun. I only need 1 for you, but I won't waste the others. Pull in beside that van on the other side, the last spot." She obeyed him, and then realized immediately that her car was totally hidden from the windows of the motel by the dark gray van on the left. "Now slide out your door and don't scream." His hand was on her arm. He slipped out behind her. She heard him pull the key ring from the starter and drop it on the floor. In one quick movement, he pushed her forward and slid open the side door of the van. With one arm, he lifted her inside and climbed in behind her. The door slid closed. Almost total darkness replaced the late afternoon sun. Kay blinked. "Donnie, don't do this," she pleaded. "I'm your friend. Talk to me, but don't." She felt herself being pushed forward, stumbled, and fell onto a narrow cot. Something was covering her face. A gag. Then with one hand he held her down, with the other snapped handcuffs on her wrists, shackles on her ankles, and joined them with a heavy metal chain. He slid open the side door of the van, jumped down, and snapped it closed. She heard the driver's door slam shut, and an instant later the van began to move. Her desperate efforts to attract attention by pounding her chained legs against the side of the van were defeated by the clicking of the tires against the macadam. Mike bit his lip impatiently as the cab driver slowed to allow a van to cross in front of them at the turnoff to the motel. His lean, disciplined body vibrated with tension as he willed the cab to move faster. He felt lousy about the way he and Kay had left it last night. He'd almost called her back when she hung up on him, but he knew Kay. She never stayed angry long. And now he could give her what she wanted. Just 1 more assignment, honey. A year at most, maybe even 6 months. Then they'll bring me into the New York offices permanently as a partner. If she wanted, they could buy a house in this area. She liked it here. The driver pulled up to the lobby entrance. Mike jumped out of the cab. Long strides took him through the lobby. He and Kay were in room 210. His first reaction when he turned the key and pushed the door open was keen disappointment. It was a little early for Kay to be back, but somehow he'd expected to find her. The room was typical motel. Shaggy carpeting, beige and brown bedspread, heavy oak veneer double dresser, television camouflaged in an armoire, windows overlooking the parking lot. The other night he had simply dropped Kay here and rushed off to New York for the first sales meeting. Reluctantly, he remembered how Kay had wrinkled her nose and said, "These rooms, they're all alike. I've been in so many of them." And yet, as usual, she had managed to add a touch of hominess to the place. There were fresh flowers in a vase, and next to it 3 small silver picture frames. One showed him holding a freshly caught striped bass. Another was a snapshot of Kay in front of their Arizona condo. The third, a Christmas card picture of Kay's sister's family. The books Kay had brought to read were on the night table. The mother-of-pearl comb, brush, and hand mirror that had been her mother's were neatly placed on the dresser. When he opened the door of the closet, there was the faint scent of the sachet bags on her satin hangers. Unconsciously, Mike smiled. Kay's exquisite neatness was a continuing source of joy to him. He decided that a quick shower would feel good. When Kay got back, they'd talk it out, and he'd take her for a festive dinner. "A full partner, Kay. Within the year. It's been worth all the moving. I promised you it would happen." As he hung up his suit and stuffed his underwear and socks and shirt in the laundry bag, the thought struck him that the constant moving had never bothered him because Kay had managed to make a home out of every motel unit or rented apartment they'd ever stayed in. At 6:15, he was sitting at the round table overlooking the parking lot, watching the news and listening for the turn of the key in the lock. He'd set out a bottle of wine from the room bar refrigerator. At 6:30, he opened the wine and poured a glass. At 7, he began watching Dan Rather, who was reporting a new outburst of terrorist activity. At 7:30, he had worked up a self-justifying annoyance. All right, so Kay's still mad at me. If she's having dinner with friends, she could have left a message. At 8 o'clock, he called the desk for the third time and was again assured by a testy operator that there were absolutely no messages for Mr. Crandall in room 210. At 9 o'clock, he began going through Kay's address book and managed to find the name of a former student he knew Kay kept in touch with, Virginia Murphy O'Neill. She answered on the first ring. Yes, she had seen Kay. Kay left the picnic just when it was breaking up. As a matter of fact, Virginia had seen Kay drive away. That would have been between 5:15 and 5:30. She was absolutely sure Kay was alone in the car. When he finished speaking to Virginia O'Neill, Mike called the police to ask about accidents between the school and the motel, and on learning there were none, reported Kay missing. The handcuffs dug into Kay's wrists. The shackles were bruising her ankles. The gag was choking her. Donnie Rubel, why was he doing this to her? She suddenly thought of Marion Martin, the guidance counselor who had asked her to take Donnie into the choir. That last week, she'd told Marion that she'd invited Donnie to sit at her table at the prom. Marion had been troubled. I've already heard about it, she said. Donnie bragged to someone that you asked him to be your date. I suppose it's understandable the way the kids make fun of him, but even so. But really, what's the difference? You're leaving. You're getting married in 2 weeks. But he's kept track of me all these years. Kay felt herself panicking. She strained her eyes but could not see him through the partition. The van seemed unusually wide, and in the near darkness she could begin to make out the outlines of a work table opposite the cot. Over it, a corkboard held a variety of tools. What did Donnie do with them? What was he planning to do to her? Mike, help me, please. The road seemed to climb and twist and curve. The narrow cot swayed, bumping her shoulder against the side of the van. Where were they going? Finally, she sensed they were descending. More curves, more bumps, and the van stopped. She heard the whirring of the panel being lowered. We're home! Donnie's voice was high-pitched and triumphant. An instant later, the side door of the van rumbled open. Kay cringed as Donnie bent over her. His breath was rapid and warm on her cheek as he released the gag. Kay, I don't want you to scream. There's no one for miles around to hear you, and you'll only make me very nervous. Promise. She gulped in the cool air. Her tongue felt thick and parched. Promise, she whispered. He removed the shackles and rubbed her ankles solicitously. The handcuffs were unsnapped from her wrists. He put an arm around her and lifted her from the cot. Her legs were numb. She stumbled, and he half-carried her down the high step to the ground. The place where he had taken her was a shabby frame house in a small clearing. A sagging porch held a rusty swing. The windows were shuttered. The thick trees around the clearing almost blotted out the last slanting rays of the sun. Donnie steered her toward the house, unlocked the door, pushed her inside, and snapped on the overhead light. The room they were in was small and grimy. An upright piano had long ago been painted white, but peeling patches showed the original black finish. Several keys were missing. An overstuffed velour couch and a chair must have at one time been bright red. Now they were faded into shades of purple and orange. A stained hooked rug covered the center of the uneven floor. A bottle of champagne in a plastic ice bucket and 2 glasses were laid out on a metal table. Next to the couch, a crudely made bookcase was stuffed with student notebooks. Look, Donnie said. He turned Kay around so she was facing the wall opposite the piano. It was covered with a poster-sized picture of her sitting with Donnie at the prom. From the ceiling, a crudely printed banner hung motionless. It read, Welcome home, Kay. Detective Jimmy Barrett was assigned to follow up the call from Michael Crandall, the guy who had reported his wife missing. On the way to the Garden View Motel, he stopped at a fast food place and ordered a hamburger and coffee. He ate as he drove, and by the time he got to the motel, his slight headache had disappeared and he was his usual cynical self. After 25 years in the prosecutor's office, he felt he'd seen it all. Jimmy Barrett's instinct told him that this was a waste of time. A 32-year-old woman goes to a reunion and doesn't get home right on the button, and the husband panics. Jimmy Barrett knew all about getting home late and not phoning. That was the primary reason he'd been divorced twice. When the door to room 210 was opened, he had to admit that the young fellow, Michael Crandall, looked sick with worry. Nice-looking guy, Jimmy Barrett thought. About 6'1", the kind of rugged looks the girls go for. But Mike's first question got Jimmy's goat. "What kept you so long?" Jimmy settled himself in a chair at the table and opened his notebook. "Listen," he said, "your wife is a couple of hours late getting back here. She's not officially missing for at least 24 hours. Did you two have a fight?" He did not miss the guilty expression on Mike's face. "You had a fight," he pressed. "Why don't you tell me about it, and then let's figure where she'd go to cool off." To Mike's ears, he was telling it badly. Kay had been upset when they'd talked on the phone last night. She'd hung up on him, but it wasn't the way it seemed. Quickly, he sketched their background. Kay had taught at Garden State High for 2 years. They'd met in Chicago at her sister's and been married from there. He'd never known her New Jersey friends. There was no point calling her sister. Jean and her husband and kids were in Europe on vacation. "Give me a description of the car," Jimmy Barrett ordered. "White 1986 Toyota. Arizona license plate." He scribbled the numbers. "Pretty far to drive," he observed. "I had a vacation coming. We decided to wind it around the company meeting and the alumni reunion. We're supposed to start driving back to Arizona tomorrow." Jimmy closed his notebook. "My hunch is she's having dinner and a drink by herself or with some old friends, and we'll be back in the next couple of hours." He glanced at the framed pictures on the table. "One of those your wife?" "That one." He snapped the picture in front of the condo. It had been a hot day. Kay was wearing shorts and a T-shirt. Her hair was held back by a band. She looked about 16. With the T-shirt clinging to her breasts and her long, slender legs and open sandals, she also looked damn sexy. Mike sensed that that was the reaction this detective had. "Why don't you let me have this picture?" Jimmy Barrett suggested. Deftly, he slipped it from the frame. "If she isn't home in the next 24 hours, we'll make up a missing persons report." Some instinct made Jimmy Barrett walk around the parking lot before he went to his own car. By now, the lot was almost full. There were a couple of white Toyotas in it, but none with Arizona plates. Then one car at the end of the lot, off by itself, caught his eye. He sauntered over to it. 5 minutes later, he was rapping sharply at the door of room 210. "Your car's in the parking lot," he told Mike. "The keys were on the floor. Looks as though your wife left them for you." As he studied the incredulous look on Mike's face, the telephone rang. Both men rushed to answer it. Jimmy Barrett reached it first, picked up the receiver, and held it so that he could hear what was said. Mike's hello was almost inaudible. And then the men listened as Kay said, "Mike, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I need time to think. I left the car in the lot. Go back to Arizona. It's all over for us. I'll be in touch with you about a divorce." "No. Kay, please. I won't leave without you." There was a click. Jimmy Barrett felt reluctant sympathy for the shocked and bewildered young man. He took Kay's picture and laid it on the table. "That's just the way my second wife took off," he told Mike. "The only difference is while I was at work, she had the movers in. Left me with a beer mug and my laundry." The remark cut through the numbness. "But that's it," Mike said. "Don't you see?" He pointed to the dresser. Kay's toilet articles. She wouldn't leave without them. Her makeup was in the bathroom cabinet, the book she was reading. He opened the closet door. Her clothes. What woman doesn't bring anything personal with her? "You'd be surprised how many," Jimmy Barrett told him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Crandall, but I have to write this up as a domestic affair." He went back to the office to file his report, then drove home. But even when he'd gone to bed, Jimmy Barrett couldn't sleep. The neatly hung clothes, the toilet articles so carefully laid out. Something in his gut was telling him Kay Crandall would have taken them with her. But she'd phoned. Had she? Jimmy sat bolt upright. Some woman phoned. He had only Mike Crandall's word that it was his wife's voice, and Mike Crandall and his wife had had a fight just before she disappeared. Hours passed as Mike sat by the phone. "She'll call again," he told himself. "She'll change her mind. She'll come back." Would she? At last Mike got up. He stripped and fell onto the bed, the side nearest the phone, ready to grasp the receiver at the first ring. Then he closed his eyes and began to cry. Kay bit her lip, trying not to scream in protest as Donnie broke the phone connection. Donnie was smiling at her solicitously. "That was very good, Kay." Would he have carried out his threat? He'd warned her that if she did not say exactly what he'd written and say it convincingly, he would go to the motel tonight and kill Mike. "I was in your room twice this past week, you know," he told her. "I do odd jobs at the motel. It was easy to make a key." Then he had led her into the bedroom. The furniture here consisted of a sagging double bed covered with a cheap chenille spread, a card table nightstand, and a battered dresser. "Do you like the bedspread?" Donnie asked. "I told the woman it was a present from my wife. She said most women like white chenille." He pointed to the comb and brush and mirror on top of the dresser. "They're almost exactly the same color as yours." He opened the closet. "Do you like your new clothes? They're all size 8, just like the ones you had in the motel." There were a couple of cotton skirts and T-shirts and a raincoat, a robe, a flowered print dress. "There's some underwear and a nightgown in the drawers," Donnie told her proudly. "And look, the shoes are your size, too, 7 medium. I got you sneakers and loafers and heels. I want my wife to be well-dressed." "Donnie, I can't be your wife," she whispered. He looked puzzled. "But you're going to be. You always wanted to marry me." It was then she noticed the chain neatly folded in the corner by the bed and attached to a metal plate on the wall. Donnie had seen her horrified expression. "Don't worry, Kay. I have one in every room. It's just that at night I'll be sleeping in the living room and I don't want you to try and leave me. And during the day I have to go to work, so I have it fixed that you'll be comfortable in the living room." He'd taken her back to the living room and ceremoniously uncorked the champagne. "To us." Now, as Kay watched him put the receiver in place, her mouth felt sour, remembering the taste of the warm, sugary champagne, the greasy hamburgers Donnie had cooked. All through the meal he'd said nothing. Then he told her to finish her coffee, that he'd be right back. When he returned, he was clean-shaven. "I only grew the beard so people wouldn't recognize me at the school," he said proudly. After that, he made her finish the champagne with him and call Mike. Now he sighed. "Kay, you must be tired. I'll let you go to bed soon. But first I'd like to read you a couple of chapters of my first book about you." With almost a swagger, he walked over to the bookcase and took out one of the notebooks. This isn't real, Kay thought. But this was real. Donnie settled himself in the overstuffed chair opposite her. The room was chilly now, but sweat glistened on his face and arms and stained his polo shirt. His unnaturally pale skin was accentuated by dark circles under his eyes. When he'd taken off his sunglasses, she'd been surprised to see how blue his eyes were. She'd remembered them as being brown. They are brown, she told herself. He must be wearing colored contacts. Everything about him is fantasy, she thought. He looked up at her almost shyly. "I feel like I'm a kid back in school," he said. A tiny whisper of hope told Kay that she might be able to establish some authority over him, teacher to student. But when he began to read, her throat closed in near panic. June 3rd. Last night I went to the prom with Kay, he intoned. We danced every dance. When I drove her home, she cried in my arms. She said her family was forcing her to marry a man she did not love and that she wanted me to come for her when I am able to take care of her. My beautiful Kay, I promise you that one day I shall claim you as my wife. A sleepless night and the fact that he had absolutely no coffee in his apartment made Jimmy Barrett unusually grumpy. After a stop for coffee, he headed for the office. When the prosecutor's office was cleared, Jimmy sauntered in. "Something stinks," he told his boss. "About that domestic affair report I filed last night, I want permission to look into the husband." Tersely, he related the interview with Mike, the finding of the car, the telephone call. The prosecutor listened and nodded. "Start digging," he said. "Let me know if you want any help." At the first sign of dawn, Mike got up, shaved and showered. He hoped that the hot, then cold needles of water would wash away the sluggishness from his brain. Somewhere during the dark hours of the night, his despair at Kay's disappearance had hardened into certainty that she would not have abandoned him that way. He pulled a notebook from his briefcase and between gulps of coffee began to jot down the possible actions he could take. Virginia Murphy O'Neill, she'd been with Kay right at the end of the picnic. She'd seen Kay leave. Maybe Kay had told her something that didn't seem important then. He'd go to Virginia's home and talk to her. Detective Barrett had spotted the car at 10 o'clock, but no one knew what time it had been left there. He'd talked to the motel employees. Maybe someone had seen Kay alone or with someone. He wanted to sit by the phone, to wait, because Kay might call again, but that was crazy. Mike's blood chilled at the thought that maybe she wouldn't be able to call again. His first stop was at the motel telephone operator station. The operator assured him that she was much too busy to give messages to people who called in, but she was very happy to take any that he might receive. He made his voice confidential. "Look, you ever have a fight with your boyfriend?" She laughed. Like every night. "Last night, I had a row with my wife. She walked out on me. I have to go out now, but I'm pretty sure she'll call. Please, can you plug the line or something so you won't forget to give her this message?" The operator's heavily mascaraed eyes sparkled with curiosity. She read the note aloud. In block letters, Mike had written, "If Kay Crandall phones, tell her Mike has to talk to her. He'll go along with anything she wants, but please leave a phone number or time when she'll call back." The operator's look was filled now with sympathy and a certain coyness. "I don't know why any woman would be dope enough to walk out on you," she told him. Mike slipped a $20 bill in her hand. "I'm counting on you to play Cupid." Talking to employees who might have seen the white Toyota come into the parking lot was hopeless. There was no parking lot attendant. The one security guard had been inside the motel most of the evening. "Just started today," he told Mike. "Otherwise, I wouldn't be here either. Nope, not a wink of trouble." He scratched his head. "Come to think of it, they did have one car grabbed last year, but it was abandoned 2 miles away. The owner said even a crook could tell it was a lemon." He chuckled. 2 hours later, Mike was 30 miles away, sitting across the table in Virginia O'Neill's house. She was a small, trim young woman who had been in Kay's choir the last year Kay taught at Garden State High. The kitchen was large and cheerful and opened into an airy recreation room cluttered with toys. Virginia's 2-year-old twins were playing there with noisy, unrestrained energy. Mike did not attempt to concoct a story about why he was looking for Kay. He liked Virginia and instinctively trusted her. By the time he had finished, he saw his own sick worry mirrored in Virginia's eyes. "That is weird," she told him. "Kay wouldn't pull that kind of stunt. She's just too considerate." "How much of her did you see at the reunion?" A teddy bear went flying past Mike's foot. An instant later, a small figure hurtled by him and tackled it. "At ease, Kevin," Virginia ordered. She explained to Mike. "My aunt gave the kids teddy bears yesterday. Dina's cuddling hers. Kevin is tackling his." This is what Kay wanted, Mike thought. A house like this, a couple of kids. The thought gave him a new and disquieting possibility. Did most people bring their children to the reunion? "Oh, there were loads of kids around." Virginia's face became contemplative. "You know, Kay did look a little wistful when she was holding Dina the other day, and she said, 'All my students have families. I never expected it would turn out like this for me.'" Mike rose to leave a few minutes later. "What are you going to do?" Virginia asked. He took Kay's picture from his pocket. "I'm going to get posters made and just hand them out. It's the only thing I can think of." When Donnie finally decided it was time to go to bed, he told Kay to change in the tiny bathroom. It held a small sink, a commode, and a makeshift shower. He handed her the nightgown he'd bought, a low-cut, transparent scrap of nylon edged with imitation lace. The robe matched. As she changed, Kay frantically tried to decide how to deal with him if he tried to attack her. He could certainly overpower her. Her only hope was to try to take charge, to establish a teacher-student relationship. But when she emerged, he didn't attempt to touch her. "Get into bed, Kay," he said. He turned down the spread. There were blue-flowered muslin sheets and pillowcases on the bed. They looked stiff and new. She walked firmly to the bed. "I'm very tired, Donnie," she said crisply. "I want to get to sleep." "Okay, I promise you I won't touch you till we're married." He covered her, then said, "I'm sorry, Kay, but I can't take a chance that you'll try to get away while I'm asleep." And then he shackled her foot to the chain. All night she'd lain awake, trying to pray, trying to plan, only able to whisper, "Mike, help me, Mike, find me." Toward dawn, she fell into an uneasy sleep. She awakened to find Donnie staring at her. Even in the semi-dark, there was no mistaking the urgency in his stance. Through clenched teeth, he whispered, "I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable, Kay. You look so pretty when you're asleep. I can hardly wait till we're married." He wanted her to cook breakfast for him. "Your future husband has a good appetite, Kay." At 8:30, he settled her in the living room. "I'm sorry to close the shutters again, but I can't risk having someone walk by and look in. Not that it ever happens, but you'll understand." He shackled her leg to the chain in the living room. "I measured it," he told her. "You can get into the bathroom. I'm leaving stuff for sandwiches and a pitcher of water and some sodas right here on the table. You can reach the piano. I want you to practice. And if you want to read, you can read all my books. They're all about you, Kay. I've been writing about you for these whole 8 years." He left the recorder phone in the padlocked wire cage near the ceiling. "I'll leave the conference call on, Kay. You'll hear people phoning jobs in for me. I beat my messages from the phone in the van every hour or so. I'll talk to you then, but you won't be able to talk to me. I'm sorry. It's a real busy day, so I may not get back till 6 or 7. As he left, he lifted her chin in his hand. "Miss me, won't you, sweetheart?" His kiss on her cheek was prim. His arm around her waist tightened convulsively. He had bolted the shutters before he left, and the dim overhead light cast shadows throughout the room. She stood on the couch, straining the chain until the shackle ripped her ankle, but it was impossible to get at the wire cage, and even so, it was padlocked. There was no chance of making a phone call. The chain was attached to a metal plate on the wall. There were 4 screws holding the plate in place. If she could somehow undo those screws, she could get out. How near was it to the highway? How fast could she move with the shackle on her ankle and carrying the chain? What could she use to undo the screws? Feverishly, Kay searched the living room. The plastic knife he'd left snapped when she tried to twist it into the head of a screw. Frustrated tears filled her eyes. She pulled the cushions from the couch. The upholstery was ripped, and she could see the wires, but there was no way she could break one loose. She dragged herself over to the piano. If she could reach into the strings, maybe there was something sharp she could pull loose. There wasn't. There was no way to loosen the metal plate. Her only hope would be if someone happened to come by while he was away. But who? There was some mail on top of the bookcase. Most of it was addressed to a box number in Howville. A few pieces had the address of this place, 4 Timber Lane, Howville. Each of them had the box number penciled on the envelope. So Donnie did not have postal delivery. Her eyes fell on the rows of black and white student notebooks. He had told her to read them. She pulled out 6 of them and dragged herself over to the couch. The light was dim, and she frowned in concentration. She'd put on the dress she'd been wearing yesterday at the picnic, wanting to keep some sense of her own identity. But the dress was wrinkled now, and she felt soiled. Soiled by her presence in this place, by the memory of his hands convulsively gripping her waist, by her sense of being a caged animal with a berserk keeper. The thought brought near hysteria. "Get a grip on yourself," she said aloud. "Mike is trying to find you. He will find you." It was as though she could feel the intensity of his love. "Mike, Mike, I love you." She didn't want to move around anymore. She wanted to stay in one place. Even Donnie Rubel had known that, and he was granting that wish. Kay realized she was laughing aloud, a shrieking, sobbing laugh that ended in a frenzy of tears. But at least it brought a certain release. After a few minutes, she dried her face with the back of her hand and began to read. The books were all alike. A day-by-day odyssey of a fantasy life starting with that night at the prom. Some of the entries were written as future plans. "When Kay and I are together, we will take a camping trip to Colorado. We will live in a tent and share the rustic outdoor life of our forefathers. We will have a double sleeping bag, and she will lie in my arms because she's a little afraid of the sounds of the animals. I will protect her and comfort her." Other times he wrote as though they had been together. "Kay and I had a wonderful day. We went into New York to the South Street Seaport. I bought her a new blouse and blue high-heeled shoes. Kay likes to hold my hand when we are walking. She loves me very much and never wants to be away from me. We have decided that if one or the other ever gets sick, we will not risk being separated. We are not afraid to die together. We will be in heaven for all eternity. We are lovers. At times it was almost impossible to make out the nearly illegible scrawl. Kay ignored her growing headache as she read book after book. The depths of Donnie's madness brought her to the edge of panic. She must finish reading every one of the books. Somehow, some way, she might get a clue as to how she could persuade him to release her, to take her somewhere in public. He constantly wrote about sharing outings with her. From about 10 o'clock on, the phone began to ring. She could hear the messages that were left for Donnie. Every nerve in her body vibrated at the sound of the impersonal voices. "Listen to me," she wanted to shriek. "Help me!" Donnie apparently had an active repair service. A pizza parlor call. Would he get over as soon as possible? One of the ovens wasn't working. Several housewives. Could he take a look at the television? The VCR. A window pane was broken. Every hour or so, Donnie beeped in for messages, then left a message for her. "Kay, darling, I miss you very much. Do you see how busy I am? I've already made $200 this morning. I'll be able to take very good care of you." After each call, she went back to reading. Over and over in all the books, Donnie kept referring to his mother. When she was 18, she let my father go too far, and she got pregnant with me and had to get married. My father walked out on her when I was a baby, and he blamed her for everything. I will never be like my father. I will not put a finger on Kay until we are married. Otherwise she might grow to hate me too, and dislike our children. In the next to last book, she learned his plans. On television, I heard a preacher say that marriages have the best chance when people have known each other for 4 seasons, that there is something in the human spirit, just as there is in nature, that needs that cycle. I was in Kay's class in the fall and winter. I will take her away during the reunion. It will still be spring. We will exchange our vows together with only God as our witness on the first day of summer. That will be on Sunday, June 21st. We will then leave and tour the country together, the two of us, lovers. Today was Thursday, June 18th. At 4 o'clock, a call came in from the Garden View Motel. Could Donnie stop by this afternoon? A couple of television sets weren't working. The Garden View Motel. Room 210. Mike. Donnie phoned a few minutes later. His voice had an echoing, hollow sound. "See what I mean, Kay? I do a lot of work over at the motel. I'm glad they called. It'll give me a chance to see if Mike Crandall is going to clear out. I hope you've been practicing our songs. I really want to sing with you tonight. Goodbye for now, my darling." There was anger in his voice when he said Mike's name. He's afraid, Kay thought. If anything upsets his plans, he'll go crazy. She must not antagonize him. She put the books back on the shelves and dragged herself over to the piano. It was hopelessly out of tune. The missing keys meant that everything she attempted to play was riddled with discordant sounds. When Donnie came in, it was nearly 8 o'clock. His face was set in grim, angry lines. "Crandall isn't going home," he told Kay. "He's asking a lot of questions about you. He's passing out your picture." Mike was at the motel. Mike had known there was something wrong. Oh, Mike, Kay thought. Find me. I'll go anywhere, any place. I'll have a baby in Kalamazoo or Peoria. What does it matter where we live as long as we're together? It was as though Donnie could read her thoughts. He stood in the doorway glowering at her. "You didn't make him believe you when you talked to him last night. It's your fault, Kay." He started across the room toward her. She shrank back on the couch, and the chain yanked the shackle on her ankle. A thin trickle of blood, warm and slippery, dripped from her bruised flesh. Donnie noticed. "Okay, that hurt you, I can tell." He went into the bathroom and returned with a warm, wet cloth. Tenderly, he lifted her leg from the floor and laid it across his lap. "You will feel much better now," he assured her as he wrapped the cloth around it. "And as soon as I'm sure you've fallen in love with me again, I'll take these off." He straightened up, and his lips grazed her ear. "Should we call our first baby Donald Jr.?" he asked. "I'm sure it will be a boy." On Thursday afternoon, Jimmy Barrett went into the office of Michael Crandall's employers, the engineering firm of Fields, Warner, Quinlan, and Brown. Upon showing his badge, he was ushered into the office of Edward Fields, who was shocked to learn that Kay Crandall was missing. No, they hadn't heard from Mike today, but that wasn't unusual. Mike and Kay were planning to drive back to Arizona. Mike was taking a week's vacation. Mike Crandall? Absolutely top drawer, the best. In fact, he'd just been voted into the partnership as of his completing a job that would begin next month in Baltimore. Yes, they knew Kay was upset about all the moves. Most of the wives felt that way. Would Jimmy know where Mike was staying? Jimmy Barrett cautiously said that it was all probably a misunderstanding. Edward Fields suddenly became very formal. "Mr. Barrett," he said, "if this is double talk and you mean you're checking up on Mike Crandall, do yourself a favor and don't waste your time. I stake my own reputation and our firm's reputation on him." Jimmy phoned the office for messages. There were none, and he went directly home. There wasn't much food in the refrigerator, and he decided to go to a takeout Chinese joint. But somehow he found his car steering toward the Garden View Motel. It was 9:30 when he arrived there. He learned from the desk clerk that Mike had been handing out pictures of his wife to all the employees, that he had given the switchboard operator $20 to give his wife a message if she called. "There was absolutely no trouble around here last night," the clerk said nervously. "I couldn't refuse to allow him to pass out those pictures, but this isn't the kind of publicity we want." At Jimmy's request, the clerk produced one of the pictures, a blow-up of the snapshot, and underneath in large block lettering, "Kay Crandall is missing. She may be ill. She is 32 years old, 5 feet 4 inches, 115 pounds. Substantial reward for information about her whereabouts." Mike's name and the phone number of the motel followed. At 10 o'clock, Jimmy knocked on the door of room 210. It was yanked open instantly, and Jimmy noted the keen disappointment on Mike's face when he saw who was there. Reluctantly, Jimmy conceded that Mike Crandall looked like a very worried guy. His clothes were rumpled, as though he'd gotten most of his sleep in catnaps. Jimmy sauntered past him and saw the stack of photocopied pictures of Kay on the table. "Where have you passed these out so far?" he asked. "Mostly around the motel. Tomorrow I'm going to deliver them to train stations and bus stops in the towns around here and ask people to put them in store windows." "You haven't heard anything?" Mike hesitated. "You have heard something," Jimmy Barrett told him. "What is it?" Mike pointed to the phone. "I didn't trust the operator to remember. I put in a recorder this afternoon. Kay phoned back while I was picking up a hamburger. Must have been about 8:30. "Were you planning to let me in on that?" "Why should I?" Mike asked. "Why should you be bothered with, what did you call it, a domestic affair?" There was a thin edge of hysteria in his voice. Jimmy Barrett walked over to the recorder, rewound the tape, and pressed the play button. The same woman's voice he had heard yesterday came on. "Mike, I'm really fed up. Go home and don't leave those pictures of me around. It's humiliating. I'm here because I want to be here." There was the sound of the receiver being slammed down. "My wife has a soft, pretty voice," Mike said. "What I hear is stress, nothing else. Forget what she's saying." "Look," Jimmy said in what for him was a kindly tone, "women don't walk out of a marriage without some stress. I should know. Even my first wife cried at the divorce hearing, and she was already pregnant by some other guy. I talk to the people you work with. They think a lot of you. Why don't you get on with your job and count your blessings? There isn't a dame worth it." He watched as Mike's face whitened. "My office called," Mike told him. "They've offered to get a private investigator to help me. I may take them up on it." Jimmy Barrett leaned over and took the cassette out of the recorder. "Can you give me the name of someone who might be able to identify your wife's voice?" he asked. All through the night, Mike sat with his head in his hands. At 6:30, he left the motel and drove to the train stations and bus stops in the neighboring towns. At 9 o'clock, he went to Garden State High. Classes were over for the summer, but the office staff was still working. He was taken to the office of the principal, Jean Pearson. Pearson listened intently, his thin face frowning and thoughtful. "I remember your wife well," he said. "I told her that if she ever wanted a job here again, it was hers. From everything her former students told me, she must have been a very good teacher." He'd offered Kay a job. Had she decided to take it? Pearson's eyes narrowed. As a matter of fact, she said, "Be careful, I may take you up on that." His attitude suddenly became formal. "Mr. Crandall, I can understand your concern, but I don't see how I can help you." He stood up. "Please," Mike begged. "There must have been pictures taken at the reunion. Did you have an official photographer?" "Yes. I want his or her name. I've got to get a full set of pictures right away. You can't refuse me that." His next stop was the photographer on Center Street, 6 blocks from the school. At least here, the only issue was cost. He placed the order and went back to the motel to hear the recorder. At 11:30, he returned to the photographer, who had made a stack of 8x10 pictures for him from all the rolls that had been shot at the reunion, over 200 prints in all. The pictures under his arm, Mike drove to Virginia O'Neill's house. All Thursday night, Kay lay awake on the lumpy mattress with its harsh new sheets. Her sense that something in Donnie was building up to an explosive level was all-pervasive. After she phoned and left the message for Mike, she'd cooked dinner for Donnie. He'd brought in cans of hash and frozen vegetables and wine. She'd gone along with him, pretending it was fun to work together. At dinner, she'd gotten him to talk about himself, about his mother. He'd shown her a picture of his mother, a slender blonde in her 40s in a bikini that belonged on a teenager. But Kay had felt her skin prickle. There was a definite resemblance between Donnie's mother and herself. They were a type, as far apart as A and Z, but a type, in size and features and hair. She got married again, 7 years ago, Donnie told her, his voice expressionless. Her husband works for one of the casinos in Las Vegas. He's a lot older than she is, but his kids are crazy about her. They're her age. Donnie produced another picture of 2 men in their 40s with their arms around his mother. She's crazy about them, too. Then he turned his attention to the food on his plate. "You're a very good cook, Kay. I like that. My mother didn't like to cook. Most of the time I just had sandwiches. She wasn't home much." After dinner, she played the piano and sang with him. He remembered the words to all the songs she used to teach him in choir. He had opened the shutters to let in the cool night air, but clearly had no fear of being heard. She asked him about that. "Nobody comes here anymore," he told her. "The lake doesn't have any fish. It's too polluted for swimming. All the other houses are just rotting away. We're safe, Kay." When he decided it was time to go to bed, he removed the leg chain and again waited for her outside the bathroom door. When she stepped out of the shower, she heard the door begin to open, but when she slammed it shut, he didn't touch it again. Then, as she was walking rapidly into the bedroom, Donnie asked, "What do you want for a wedding supper, Kay? We should plan something special." She pretended to be seriously considering the question, then shook her head and said firmly, "I absolutely cannot make plans to get married until I have a white gown. We'll have to wait." "I didn't think about that, Kay," he said as he tucked her into bed and fastened the shackle on her ankle. She drifted in and out of sleep. Each time she woke up, it was to see Donnie standing at the foot of the bed staring at her. Her eyes would begin to open, and she'd force them shut, but it was impossible to deceive him. The dim light he left on in the living room shone on the pillow. "It's all right, Kay. I know you're awake. Talk to me, darling. Are you cold? In a few days when we're married, I'll keep you warm." At 7 o'clock, he brought coffee to her. She pulled herself up, careful to tuck the sheet and blanket under her arms. Her murmured thank you was stilled by a kiss. "I'm not going to work all day," Donnie told her. "I was thinking all night that you said you didn't have a gown to wear to our wedding. I'm going to buy you a dress today." The coffee cup in her hand began to tremble. With a mighty effort, Kay managed to stay calm. This might be her only chance. "Donnie, I'm sorry," she said. "I really don't want to seem ungrateful, but the clothes you bought for me really don't fit properly. Every woman wants to select her own wedding gown." "I didn't think about that," Donnie said. Again he looked puzzled and thoughtful. "That means I'd have to take you to the store. I'm not sure if I want to do that. But I'd do anything to make you happy." On Friday morning at 6:30, Jimmy Barrett gave up trying to sleep and stomped into the kitchen. He made a pot of coffee, fished for a ballpoint pen on the table, and started making notations on the back of an envelope. 1. Did Kay Crandall make those phone calls? Ask Virginia O'Neill to identify the voice. Number 2, if voice is that of Kay Crandall, check stress level with lab. Number 3, if Kay Crandall did make phone calls, she knew about the posters a few hours after Mike Crandall started distributing them in the motel. How? The last question vanquished any final vestiges of sleepiness in Jimmy's brain. Could this be some kind of crazy hoax cooked up by Mike and Kay Crandall? At 10:30, Jimmy Barrett was the unwilling recipient of a game of catch with 2-year-old Kevin O'Neill. He tossed the ball to Kevin, who caught it with one hand, but as he threw it back, Kevin yelled, "Scravets!" Jimmy missed the easy catch. Scravets is his way of putting a hex on you, Virginia explained. She had absolutely no doubt about identifying Kay's voice. Except that it doesn't really sound like her, Virginia said. Mrs. Crandall. Oh, blazes, she kept telling me to call her Kay. Kay has such a lilt in her voice. She always sounds warm and up. That's her voice, but it isn't her voice. Where's your husband? Jimmy asked. Virginia looked startled. He's at work. He's a trader in the mercantile exchange. You happy? Of course I'm happy. Virginia's tone was frosty. May I ask why that question? How would you sound if you were taking off with or without your kids and dumping your husband? Stressed? Virginia grabbed Kevin just before he tackled his twin. Detective Barrett, if I were going to leave my husband, I'd sit across the table from him and tell him when and why I was leaving. And you want to know something? Kay Wesley Crandall would do it exactly the same way. It's obvious that you're projecting the way you think women like Kay and I act. Now, if you have no further questions, I'm pretty busy. She stood up. Mrs. O'Neill, he said, I spoke to Mike Crandall just before I came here. I understand he's ordered copies of the pictures taken at the reunion and that he'll be over here about noon with them. I'll be back at noon. In the meantime, try to remember if Kay dated anyone from around here. Or give me the names of the faculty members she was friendly with. Virginia separated the twins, who were now fighting over custody of the available teddy bear. Her manner changed. I'm beginning to like you, Detective Barrett, she told him. The same thought that had occurred to Jimmy Barrett, that Kay knew he was showing her picture only hours after he'd passed it out at the motel, struck Mike as he drove to Virginia O'Neill's house with the stacks of pictures of the reunion. When Virginia answered the doorbell, Mike was on the raw edge of hysteria. The sight of Jimmy Barrett's glum face was like another turn to the already taut wire that was his nervous system. What are you doing here? His blunt inquiry was almost a shout. He was aware of Virginia O'Neill's hand on his arm, of the fact that the house seemed unnaturally quiet. Mike, Virginia said, Detective Barrett wants to help. A couple of the other women from our class are here. We've got some sandwich makings. We'll go over the pictures together. For the second time in as many days, Mike felt tears welling in his eyes. This time he managed to force them back. He was introduced to the other young women, Marjorie, Joan, and Dottie, all students of Garden State High in the years Kay had taught there. They sat together and studied the pictures Mike had brought. That's Bobby. He lives in Pleasantwood. That's John Durkin, Kay's talking to in that picture. His wife is with him. It was Jimmy Barrett who taped each picture to a poster-sized cardboard, marked the heads of the people and each with a number, and then had the young women identify anyone they knew. It was soon obvious that there were too many no one could remember in groups surrounding Kay. At 3:00, Jimmy said, Sorry, but we're not getting anywhere. I know you have a new principal at the school. He won't be any help to us. But is there any teacher who's been around a long time who might be able to identify former students you people don't know? Virginia and her friends exchanged long, thoughtful stares. Virginia spoke for all of them. Marion Martin, she said. She was at Garden State from the day it opened. She retired 2 years ago. She lives in Litchfield, Connecticut now. She was supposed to come to the reunion, but had other commitments she couldn't break. She's the one we need, Jimmy Barrett said. Does anyone have her phone number or address? The flicker of hope that had begun in Mike when he realized that Jimmy Barrett was on his side now leaped into a flame. People were working with him, were trying to help. Kay, wait for me. Let me find you. Virginia was looking through her phone book. Here's Miss Martin's number. She began dialing. Vina Howard had accomplished a lifelong ambition when she opened the clothes cartel shop in Pleasantwood, New Jersey. She had been an assistant buyer at J.C. Penney before her relentlessly unhappy marriage. When, after 18 years, she'd finally left Nick Howard, she'd returned to the family home in time to nurse her two aging parents through a series of heart attacks and strokes. After they died, Vina had sold the old house, bought a small co-op, and realized her heart-hunger dream to open a dress shop that would cater to the modern suburbanite on a budget. As an afterthought, she'd added a line that would appeal to the modern suburbanite's teenage daughter, and it was that mistake that had become a daily vexation. On Friday morning, June 19th, Vina was straightening the dresses on the rack, polishing the glass over the costume jewelry counter, giving a push and a tug to the chairs near the curtained-off dressing room area and muttering to herself. Horrible kids. Come in here and try on every stitch in the place. Get makeup all over the collars. Leave everything on the floor. This is the last season I catered those slobs. Vina had genuine reason to be upset. She'd just had expensive new wallpaper put in the minuscule changing area, and some fresh kid had written the usual four-letter word all over one wall. She'd finally scrubbed it clean, but the paper was blotched and shredded. Nevertheless, the day started pleasantly enough. By 10:30, the time her assistant Edna arrived, the store was bustling and the cash register jingling. At 3:15, there was a lull, and Vina and Edna managed to have a peaceful cup of coffee. Edna promised that her husband would surely be able to stretch the leftover wallpaper to replace the damaged area in the dressing room. A visibly cheered Vina had a warm smile on her face when the door of the shop opened and a couple came in. A pretty young woman of about 26 or 8, in a cheap-looking T-shirt and skirt, and a gaunt-looking man about the same age whose arm was tightly around her. His dark red curly hair looked as though he'd just left a hairdresser. His china blue eyes glittered. There was something spacey about the two of them, Vina thought. Her smile tightened. There'd been a series of drug-related robberies in the area lately. "We want a long white dress," the man told her. "Size 8. "Well, the prom season is over," Vina said uneasily. "I don't have much of a selection in long dresses. This one should be suitable for a wedding." Vina addressed herself to the young woman. "Have you any particular style in mind?" Desperately, Kay tried to find a way to communicate with this woman. From the corner of her eye, she could see that the clerk at the cash register was sensing something odd about Donnie and herself, that wild-looking red wig he was wearing. She also knew that Donnie's hand was touching the gun in his pocket, and that any slight effort on her part to alert these women would become their death sentence. "Something in a cotton," she said. "Do you have eyelet? Or maybe a sheer jersey?" She had spotted the curtain-off dressing area. She would have to go in there alone to change. Maybe she could leave a message. The more dresses she tried on, the more time she would have. But they only had one size 8 long white eyelet dress. "We'll take it," Donnie said. "I want to try it on," Kay said firmly. "The dressing room is right there," she pointed out. She walked over and pulled back the curtain. "See?" It was barely large enough for one person. The privacy curtain did not go down to the floor. "All right, you can try it on," Donnie said. "I'll wait right outside." He firmly vetoed Vina's offer to assist Kay. "Just hand the dress in to her." Kay whipped off the T-shirt and skirt. Frantically, she glanced around the small cubicle. A narrow shelf held a box with a couple of straight pins, but no pencil, no way to leave a message. She pulled the dress over her head, then grabbed a pen. The wallpaper on one side of the cubicle was stained and shredded. On the other side, she tried to scratch the word help. The pin was light. It was impossible to move it quickly. She managed a large, jagged H. "Hurry up, sweetheart." She shoved aside the curtain. I can't reach these buttons in the back," she told the sales clerk. As she fastened the buttons, Vina glanced nervously at the cash register. Edna shook her head slightly. Get rid of them was what she was saying. Kay steadied herself in the floor-length mirror. "I don't think it's quite right," she said. "Have you anything else?" "We'll take this one," Donnie interrupted. "You look beautiful in it." He pulled out a wad of bills. "Hurry up, honey," he ordered. "We're running late." Inside the cubicle, Kay stepped out of the dress, handed it around the curtain, yanked on her T-shirt and skirt, and grabbed another pin. With one hand, she pretended to be fussing with her hair. With the other, she tried to begin the letter E on the wallpaper, but it was impossible. She whirled around when she heard Donnie pull open the curtain. "What's taking you so long, sweetheart?" he asked. Her back was to the wall where she'd begun to write. She continued to run her fingers through her hair as though trying to smooth it. She let the pin drop behind her and watched as Donnie's eyes took in the tiny cubicle. Then, apparently satisfied, he took her hand and, with the box under his arm, hurried her from the store. Marion Martin had just completed planning her new azaleas when the pealing of the phone summoned her into the house. She was a tall, 67-year-old woman with a trim, disciplined body, close-cropped hair that curled around her face, lively brown eyes, and a kind, no-nonsense manner. In the 2 years since she had retired from her position as head guidance counselor at Garden State High and moved to this quiet Connecticut town, she joyfully indulged herself in the avocation she'd never had enough time for. Now her English garden was her unabashed pride. The telephone call that Friday afternoon was therefore not a welcome interruption, but after she finished listening to Virginia O'Neill, Marion forgot about her unplanted dahlias. Kay Wesley, she thought, a born teacher. She'd always been willing to take on kids who weren't doing well. All her students were crazy about her. Kay? Missing? "I have a couple of errands," she told Virginia, "but I can be on my way by 6. It should take about 2 hours. Have the pictures ready. There isn't a kid who went to Garden State whose face I don't know." As she hung up, Marion was struck by the memory of Wendy Fitzgerald, the Garden State senior who 20 years ago had vanished during a school picnic. Her murderer had been Rudy Kluger, the school handyman. Rudy must be due out of prison around now. Marion's mouth went dry. Not that, please. At 5:45, her overnight bag tossed in the back of her car, she was on her way to New Jersey. Details of that horrible time, from the moment Wendy Fitzgerald was reported missing to the day her body was found, filled Marion's mind. So engrossed was she in her apprehension about Rudy that she pushed deep into her subconscious the fleeting thought that some incident involving Kay was eluding her. Virginia put the receiver down. "Miss Martin should be here around 8, she said. Jimmy Barrett pushed back his chair. "I've got to check in at the office. If this guidance counselor comes up with anything tonight, anything at all, call this number. Otherwise, I'll be back in the morning." He handed Virginia a somewhat dog-eared card. The other young women stood up as well. They, too, would come back to work with Miss Martin tomorrow. Mike stood up. "I'll get some more flyers around. Then I'll go back to the motel. There's always the chance that Kay will phone again." This time he tacked Kay's pictures on telephone poles in the main streets of the towns he drove through and in the large shopping malls in the area. In Pleasantwood, he had a near brush with a van that hurtled past him as he drove into the municipal parking lot. Damn fool, Mike thought. He'll kill someone. Donnie had parked the van in the municipal lot behind the closed cartel. When they left the store, he kept his arm tightly around Kay until they reached the van. Then he opened the side door and nudged her forward. Frantically, Kay looked at the burly young man about to start his car 2 parking spaces away. For an instant she made eye contact with him, then felt the tip of the gun pressed against her side. "There's a little kid in the back of that car, Kay," Donnie said softly. "You make a sound, and that guy and the kid are dead." Her legs turned to rubber as she stumbled up the step. "Here's the package, honey," Donnie said loudly. He watched as the nearby car passed them, then jumped into the van and yanked the door shut. "You wanted to signal that guy, Kay," he hissed. The gag that he shoved in her mouth was cruelly tight. His hands were rough as he snapped on the handcuffs, shackled her feet, and looped the chain through them. He dropped the box beside her on the cot. "Just remember why we bought that dress, Kay, and don't make eyes at other men." He opened the door a crack, looked around, then pushed the door a little wider and slipped out. In the moment that light filtered into the van, Kay's glance fell on a long, thin object on the floor beneath the work table. A screwdriver. If she had the screwdriver, she might be able to unfasten the metal plate from the wall in the cottage, might have a chance to get away while Donnie was at work. The van leaped forward. Donnie had to be at the breaking point to drive this fast. Let the police see him, she prayed. Please! But then the van slowed perceptibly. He must have realized he was driving too fast. She turned on her side, slowly dropped her manacled hands, and with her fingertips tried to reach the screwdriver. Angry, frustrated tears blurred her eyes, and impatiently she shook them away. In the near dark, she could barely make out the long, thin outline of the tool. But no matter how desperately she tried, even though the handcuffs burned her wrist bones, it was beyond her reach. She rolled onto her back and dragged her hands up until they rested on her knees. The cot creaked as she worked her way to a sitting position, swung her legs down, wiggled her body until she was at the very edge of the cot, and stretched her legs toward the screwdriver. It was less than an inch beyond her reach. Ignoring the searing pain as the shackles bit into her legs, she pointed the toes of her sandals until she felt the thin blade, then grasped it between the soles of her sandals and pulled the screwdriver back toward the cot. Finally, it was directly below her. She swung her legs up, fell onto her back, and again dropped her hands over the side toward the floor. The bruised flesh sent angry pain signals that she no longer felt because her fingers were closing around the handle of the screwdriver, closing around it, holding it, lifting it up. For a moment she rested, gasping from the effort, exulting in her victory. Then her fingers tightened on the tool as a new thought struck her. How could she get it into the house? There was no place to hide it on her person. The cheap T-shirt clung to her body. The cotton skirt had no pockets. The sandals were open. They were nearly at the cabin. She could feel the movement of the van as it twisted and turned and bumped along the dirt road. The dress box flipped over and brushed her arm. The dress box! The clerk had tied the string around the box with a double knot. She couldn't possibly undo it. Carefully, Kay slipped her fingers between the lid and the bottom of the box, then slowly began to work the screwdriver into the opening her fingers had made. She felt the lid tear at the side. The van stopped. Desperately, she pushed the screwdriver in, trying to force it between the folds of the dress, and managed to flip the box on its side before the door opened. "We're home, Kay," Donnie said tonelessly. She prayed that he wouldn't notice the angry new marks on her wrists and ankles, the tear in the box. But his movements when he unlocked the chain and cuffs were automatic. He slung the box under his arm without glancing at it, unlocked the cabin door, and pushed her inside quickly as though he was afraid of being followed. The inside of the cabin was stifling. Every instinct told Kay that somehow she must try to calm him. "You're hungry," she told him. "You haven't eaten for hours." She'd fixed lunch when he returned to the cabin at 1 o'clock, but he was too agitated to eat. "I'll make a sandwich for you, and some lemonade," she said. "You need it." He dropped the dress box on the couch and stared at her. "Tell me how much you love me," he ordered. His eyes were wide-pupilled now, his grip on her wrists tighter than the handcuffs had been. His breath came in short, uneven gasps. Terrified, Kay stepped back until the rough velour of the couch touched her legs. He was about to come apart. He would know immediately if she tried to placate him with lies. Instead, she said crisply, "Donnie, I'd like to hear more about why you love me. You say you do, but you always get angry at me. How can I believe you anymore? Read to me from one of your books while I get us something to eat." She forced a note of cold authority into her voice. "Donnie, I want you to read to me now." "Of course I'll read, Miss Wesley." His voice lost the hard edge of anger, became higher-pitched, almost adolescent. "But first I have to check my messages." He had left the phone on the table by the couch when they went out. Now he took a notebook and pencil from his pocket and pressed the play button. There were 3 messages, one from a hardware store. Could Donnie come in tomorrow? Their repairman was out sick. One from the Garden View Motel. They needed extra help installing some electronic equipment for a seminar. They really needed him to work through the evening. The last call was obviously from an elderly man. There was a distinct wheeze in his halting voice as he identified himself. Clarence Gerber. Could Donnie stop by and take a look at the toaster? It wouldn't heat up, and the wife was burning all the bread trying to make toast in the oven. A labored laugh followed. "And put us on the top of the list, Donnie. Call and let me know when you're coming." Donnie put his notebook away, rewound the tape, and this time stood on the couch to set the recorder in the wire box. "I can't stand that old guy Gerber," he told Kay. "No matter how many times I tell him not to, when I'm fixing something of his, he gets in the van and keeps talking to me while I work. And I have to go to the motel first. They pay me on the spot. I've saved a lot of money for us, Kay." He got down from the couch. "And now I'll read to you. Show me which books you haven't seen yet." I sensed from that first day in choir, when Kay put her hands on my chest and told me to sing, that there was something special and beautiful between us, Donnie read as he sipped the lemonade. His voice calmed as he spoke of the many times she'd phoned him and asked him to come to her. As she sat opposite him, Kay found it almost impossible to swallow. Over and over he repeated how happy he would be to die with her, how glorious it would be to die defending his right to her. He finished reading and smiled. "Oh, I forgot," he said. Reaching up, he pulled off the curly red wig, revealing his balding head of skimpy brown hair. He leaned down and for the first time removed the blue contact lenses. His own pupils, muddy brown with odd flecks of green, stared at her. "Do you love me best when I'm the real me?" he asked. Without waiting for an answer, he came around the table and pulled her up. "I've got to go to the motel. I'll get you settled in the living room, Kay." At the clothes cartel, Vina Howard and her assistant Edna spent a gossipy 5 minutes discussing the couple who had bought the white eyelet dress. "I swear the two of them were on drugs," Edna volunteered. "But listen, we both agreed that dress was a mistake. You were about to reduce it, right? So now you got full price, and cash at that." Vina agreed. "But I still say he was weird-looking. He dyes his hair. I could swear it." The door opened and a new customer came in. Vina helped her select several skirts and then led her to the dressing area. Her burst of indignation startled both Edna and the customer. "Look!" Vina exploded. With a trembling finger, she pointed to the jagged H on the wall. "She was worse than he was," she fumed. "Now we won't have enough paper to fix both walls. I wish I had my hands on her." Even the customer's sympathetic exclamations, and Edna again pointing out that she had sold the eyelet dress full price, did not placate Vina's sense of outrage. Vina continued to churn inwardly, to the point that at 6 o'clock, when she closed the shop and started to walk the 3 blocks home, she stared straight at the poster, dangling from the telephone pole, and it did not register on her consciousness that the woman whose face she was seeing was the same miserable creature who had wrecked the rest of her wallpaper. It was nearly 9 o'clock when Mike arrived back at the Garden View Motel. The night had become hot and muggy, and beads of perspiration formed on his forehead as soon as he left the air-conditioned car. He began walking toward the motel. A wave of dizziness made him stop and steady himself against the car he was passing, a dark gray van. He realized that he'd eaten nothing since the sandwich at Virginia's home. He went directly to the room and checked the recorder. There were no messages. The coffee shop was still open. Only 3 or 4 booths were occupied. He ordered a sliced steak sandwich and coffee. The waitress offered a sympathetic smile. "You're the one whose wife is missing. Good luck. I'm sure it will turn out fine. I have a feeling." "Thank you. I wish to God I had that feeling," Mike thought. On the other hand, at least people were noticing Kay's picture. The waitress left him and returned with a takeout bag and a check for the man seated 2 booths away. "Working late tonight, aren't you, Donnie?" she asked. It was after 6 o'clock when Donnie pulled away in the van. As soon as the sound of the engine faded, Kay worked her hand into the dress box for the screwdriver. If she could free the metal plate from the wall, she might be able to get to the phone. But as she studied the thick padlock on the cage, she knew that that would be hopeless. It was the metal plate or nothing. She pulled herself over to the plate and crouched on the floor. The screws were so tightly in place they might have been welded to the plate. The screwdriver was small. Minutes passed, a half hour, an hour. Unaware of the heat, of the perspiration that soaked her body, of the exhaustion in her fingers, she worked on. Finally she was rewarded. One of the screws began to turn. With paralyzing slowness, it yielded. Finally it was completely loose. Carefully she tightened it just enough to keep it from wobbling and began on the next screw. How much time had passed? How long would Donnie be gone? After a while, numbness took over. She worked like a robot, heedless of the pain shooting through her hands and arms, the cramps in her legs. She had just felt the second screw begin to move when she realized that the faint sound she had heard was the van. Frantically, she dragged herself to the couch, slipped the screwdriver into the springs, and picked up the book Donnie had left on the couch. The door creaked open. Donnie's heavy footsteps resounded across the floorboards. He was holding a bag in his hand. "I brought you a hamburger and a soda, Kay," he told her. "I saw Mike Crandall in the coffee shop. Your picture is all over the place. It wasn't a good idea for you to make me take you shopping. We're going to move up our wedding a day. I have to go to the motel in the morning. They'll think it's funny if I don't show up. And they owe me money. But when I come back, we'll get married and clear out of here." The decision seemed to have made him calm. He walked over to her and put the bag on the couch. "Aren't you glad that whenever I get something for myself, I think of you?" His kiss on her forehead was lingering. Kay tried not to show revulsion. At least in the dim light, he wouldn't notice how swollen her hands were. He was going to the motel to work tomorrow morning. That meant she had just a few hours left before she disappeared with him. Donnie cleared his throat. "I'm going to be such a nervous bridegroom, Kay," he said. "Let's practice our wedding vows now. I, Donald, take thee, Kay." He had totally memorized the traditional marriage service. Kay's mind was filled with the memory of saying, "I, Catherine, take thee, Michael." Oh, Mike, she thought. Mike. "Well, Kay," the edgy tone was returning to Donnie's voice. "I don't have as good a memory as you," she said. "Maybe you'd better write the words down so I can practice tomorrow when you're at work." Donnie smiled. In the dim, shadowy light, his eyes seemed deep in their sockets, his face thin to the point of being skeletal. "I think that would be nice," he said. "Now why don't you eat your hamburger?" That night Kay kept her eyes resolutely closed, forced her breathing to sound even. She was aware of Donnie drifting back and forth and watching her, but her mind was focused only on the fact that even if she did manage to get the metal plate loose before he came back, there was no guarantee that she could escape him. How far could she go in these unfamiliar woods, with one foot shackled and carrying the weight of the plate and the chain? The traffic was heavy on Route 95 South. At 6:30, Marion Martin realized that the slight, persistent headache she was developing was probably the result of having eaten only a small sandwich for lunch. A cup of tea and a roll, she thought longingly. But the sense of urgency that was steadily building within her kept her foot on the accelerator until at 7:50 she pulled into the driveway of Virginia O'Neill's home in Jefferson Township. Virginia had cheese and crackers and a chilled decanter of wine waiting in the living room. Gratefully, Marion nibbled the brie, sipped Chablis, and absorbed the pleasantly furnished room with its grand piano covered with sheet music in one alcove. The sheet music triggered Marion's memory. "You played the piano in Kay Wesley's choir class, didn't you?" "Well, not for the whole year, just the last semester Kay taught." "What am I trying to remember about that class?" Marion wondered aloud impatiently. Dinner was a lemon chicken casserole with a wild rice mix and a salad, but hungry as she was, Marion barely knew what she was swallowing. She insisted on studying the reunion pictures while she ate. Rudy Kluger had been tall and thin. He'd been in his early 30s when he murdered Wendy Fitzgerald. That means he'd be in his 50s now. Marion skimmed the pictures quickly. The earliest graduates would be about 40. There shouldn't be too many older men in the photos. There weren't. The few she saw did not remotely resemble Rudy. As she went through the pictures, Virginia filled her in on the fact that Mike was distributing Kay's picture in local towns, that the detective on the case had first seemed to doubt this was a legitimate disappearance, but now was actively helpful. "He'll be at his office till pretty late tonight, I gather," Virginia said. "He told me to phone if we think we've come across anything." She moved her chair to sit next to Marion as Jack cleared the table and set out coffee cups. Virginia picked up one picture. "You see," she said, "this was right at the end. Kay had just finished a hot dog. She started saying goodbye to the people around her. I was the last one she spoke to. Then she walked through the path to the parking lot." Marion studied the picture. Kay was standing very near the path, but something caught Marion's eye in the woods leading to the parking lot. "Have you a magnifying glass?" she asked. A few minutes later, they were in agreement. Almost hidden behind a big elm tree near the parking lot was something that might be a man trying to avoid being seen. "This probably means absolutely nothing," Marion said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But maybe it would be a good idea for me to talk to that detective now." Jimmy Barrett was at his desk when the call came. He was, as a matter of fact, studying the files of one Rudy Kluger, who 20 years ago had killed and murdered a 16-year-old student at Garden State High after waylaying her in the woods near the picnic area. Rudy Kluger had been released from Trenton State Prison 6 weeks ago and had already violated his parole by not reporting to his parole officer. Jimmy Barrett felt a weight settle in his chest as he listened to the former guidance counselor tell him that in one picture she thought she saw someone lurking in the woods just as Kay Crandall was leaving, and that she had this horrible worry about Rudy Kluger. "Miss Martin," Jimmy Barrett said, "I'll tell you straight. Rudy Kluger is out of jail. We've got an alert out for him now. But will you do me a favor? Pretend that Kluger doesn't exist. Go over those pictures with an open mind. I don't know why, but I have a feeling you're going to come up with something that will help us." He was absolutely right about having an open mind, she knew. Marion hung up the phone and began studying the pictures again. At 11:30, she could not keep her eyes open. "I'm not as young as I used to be," she said apologetically. The guest room was at the other end of the second floor from the nursery. Even so, Marion vaguely heard one of the twins wailing in the middle of the night. She fell back to sleep, but in that brief wakening time realized that something was bothering her, something she had seen in the photos that was absolutely vital to remember. Clarence Gerber did not sleep well that Friday night. There was nothing Brenda enjoyed more for breakfast than toast or waffles, and the toaster hadn't worked for 2 days. As Brenda said, there was no use buying a new one when Donnie Rubel could fix the old one good as new for $10. On that restless night, Clarence reflected that the real problem with retirement was you didn't have anything to do when you woke up, and that meant you had nothing to talk about. Now, Brenda's 2 sisters hung around the house so much he never could get a word in edgewise. They always cut him off when he began to talk. At 5 a.m, as Brenda rumbled and snorted next to him, as far removed from his body on the double bed as she could be without falling off it, Clarence conceived his plan. Maybe it wasn't worth Donnie's time to drive around for a $10 job. But Clarence had worked up a solution. Once or twice, he hadn't had any cash when Donnie fixed something, so he'd mailed a check to Donnie. He had his address, someplace in Howville, Timber Lane, that was it, near those lakes where Clarence used to go swimming when he was a kid. Later in the morning, he'd find Donnie's house, leave the toaster if Donnie was out, and a note saying he'd pick it up as soon as Donnie had it ready. Sleep made Clarence's eyelids begin to droop. He had a half smile on his face as he dozed off. It was good to have a plan, to have something to do when you woke up. Long before dawn, Kay heard the sounds of noisy activity in the living room. What was Donnie doing? The thump of objects being dropped. Donnie was packing. The inevitability of what those pulling and tugging sounds meant caused Kay to clamp her hands and fists over her mouth. If ever she needed to stay calm to keep him from becoming suspicious, it was in these next few hours. The only chance she had to escape him would be when he completed his final jobs and deliveries this morning. If he suspected anything, he would leave with her immediately. She was able to pretend a drowsy smile when he handed her a cup of coffee at 7 o'clock. "You're so thoughtful, Donnie," she murmured as she sat up, again careful to tuck the blankets high under her arms. He looked pleased. He was wearing dark blue trousers and a short-sleeved shirt. Instead of his usual sneakers, he had on highly polished light brown shoes. He'd obviously taken special pains with his hair. It was plastered close to his skull as though he'd used hairspray. His mud-colored eyes smoldered with excitement. "I have it all figured out, Kay," he told her. "I'll pack most of the stuff in the van before I leave. That way, the minute I get back, we can be married and have our wedding brunch. It has to be brunch because I don't want to wait until tonight. Then we'll just take off. I'm going to leave a message on the recorder right now that I'm on an extended vacation. I'll tell my best customers this morning that I'm getting married. That way, nobody will think it funny if we don't come back for a long time." He was obviously pleased with his plans. He bent over and kissed the top of Kay's head. "Maybe when you have a baby, we'll go visit my mother. She always laughed at me when I told her I never got anywhere with girls. She used to say that the only way I'd ever get a girl was to tie her up. But when she sees how pretty you are and how much we love our baby, I bet she apologizes." He would not let Kay dress before breakfast. "Just put on your robe." The intensity in his body was approaching fever pitch. She did not want to walk around in the sheer clinging nightgown and robe. "Donnie, it's awfully chilly. Lend me your raincoat while we wait." He had left out a few utensils and the coffee pot, toaster, 2 plates. Everything else was packed. "Most of the time we'll be staying in tents and cabins till we get to Wyoming, Kay. You like roughing it, don't you?" She had to bite her lips to hold back shrieks of hysterical laughter. She had considered furnished condos, many of them very attractive, as roughing it. Mike, Mike. The thought of his name changed the approaching laughter into a flood of tears. Don't, she warned herself. Don't. Are you crying, Kay? Donnie leaned across the table and peered at her. Somehow she swallowed back the need to weep. Of course not. She managed to sound breathless and teasing. Every bride gets the premarital jitters. The broad separation of his lips from his teeth was a caricature of a smile. Finish your breakfast, Kay. You've got to do your packing. He produced a bright red suitcase. Surprise! I bought it for you. But he refused to allow her to put on jeans and a T-shirt. No, Kay. Pack everything except your wedding dress. At 9:30 he left, promising he wouldn't be gone more than 2 or 3 hours. In the living room, his 2 old suitcases surrounded her new red one. Only the poster with them and the prom picture remained on the wall. We'll exchange our vows in front of it, Donnie had said. The eyelet dress was too tight at the shoulders. It pulled and then tore as she reached deep into the springs of the couch for the screwdriver. Kay grasped the screwdriver in her hand, then laid it down and carefully shredded the scrap of paper on which Donnie had written the marriage vows for her. He was going to kill her anyhow. She might as well defy him here, where at least her body might someday be found and Mike would be free to stop looking for her. With the calmness of desperation, she picked up the screwdriver, got up from the couch, and walked to the metal plate, the heavy chain dragging with her. She crouched down, undid the already loosened screw, dropped it onto the floor, and put the head of the screwdriver into the second screw, the one that had already begun to loosen last evening. Mike arrived at the O'Neill home at 9 o'clock. It was a beautiful June day, brilliant with sunlight. Incongruous that anything could be wrong on a day like this, Mike thought. As though in a dream, he saw a young man on the neighboring lawn turning on his sprinkler. All around him, people were doing ordinary Saturday morning chores, or going to play golf, or taking their kids on outings. For the last 3 hours, he'd been nailing more copies of Kay's picture to telephone poles around local swim clubs. He rapped on the screen door, then let himself in. The others were already around the kitchen table. Virginia and Jack O'Neill, Jimmy Barrett, Virginia's 3 classmates. Mike was introduced to Marion Martin. He immediately sensed the additional tension in the room. Dreading to ask, he looked squarely at Jimmy Barrett. "Tell me what you know." "We don't know anything," Jimmy Barrett told him. "We think Miss Martin may have spotted someone hiding on the path just when Kay was leaving the picnic. We're having that print blown up now. We're not even sure that it isn't a tree branch or something." He hesitated as though he was about to go on, then said, "I suggest we don't waste time. Let's keep on identifying the people in these pictures." Minutes passed. Mike sat helplessly. There wasn't any way he could help. He thought about driving to towns farther away that he hadn't yet covered with Kay's picture, but something held him here. He had the sense of time running out. He was sure everyone did. At 9:30, Marion Martin shook her head impatiently. "I thought I'd know every face, fool that I was. People change so. What I need is a list of the students who signed up for the reunion. That will help." "It's Saturday," Virginia said. "The office is closed, but I'll call Gene Pearson at home. He lives 4 blocks from the school. He's the principal at Garden State," she told Mike. "I've met him." Mike thought of Pearson's earlier reluctance, but when he arrived a scant 30 minutes later, it was obvious that, like Jimmy Barrett, Gene Pearson had changed his attitude. He was unshaven. He looked as though he had thrown on the clothes nearest at hand. He apologized for taking so long. Pearson handed Marion the list of people who had attended the reunion. "How can I help?" he asked. The phone rang. They all jumped. Virginia picked up the receiver. "It's for you," she told Jimmy Barrett. Mike tried to decipher Jimmy's expression, but could not. "Okay, read him his stinking Miranda warnings and make sure he signs the statement," Jimmy said. "I'll be right down." The room was deathly quiet. Jimmy replaced the receiver and looked at Mike. "We've been trying to track down a guy named Rudy Kluger, who's just been released from prison. He served 20 years for murdering a girl whom he abducted from the picnic area near Garden State High." Mike's chest tightened as he waited. Jimmy moistened his lips. "This may have nothing to do with your wife's disappearance, but they just picked up Kluger in those same woods. He tried to waylay a young woman jogger." "And he may have been there on Wednesday?" Mike said. "It's possible. I'll go with you." Kay. Mike thought. Kay. As if suddenly feeling their task was hopeless, everyone at the table laid down the pictures. One of Virginia's classmates began to sob. "Mike, Kay did phone you night before last," Virginia reminded him. "But not last night. And now Kluger's trying to pick up someone else." Mike walked behind Jimmy Barrett to the car. He was aware that he must be having a shock reaction. He felt absolutely nothing, not pain, nor sorrow, nor anger. Again he whispered Kay's name, but evoked no emotion. Jimmy Barrett was backing the car from the driveway when Jack O'Neill dashed out of the house. "Hold it," he shouted. "Your office is on the phone. A woman named Vina Howard saw one of those posters with Kay's picture and swears Kay was in her dress shop in Pleasantwood yesterday afternoon." Jimmy Barrett slammed on the brakes. He and Mike jumped from the car and rushed into the house. Jimmy grabbed the phone. Mike and the others crowded around him. Jimmy asked questions and barked instructions. He hung up and addressed Mike. "This Howard woman and her assistant both swear it was Kay. She was with some guy in his 20s. The Howard woman thought they were high on something, but after she talked to my people, she realized Kay was probably terrified. Kay scratched the letter H on the wall in the dressing room." "A guy in his 20s, Mike exclaimed. "That means it can't be Kluger." Relief mingled with new dread. "She tried to write something in the dressing room." His voice choked as he whispered, "A word starting with H. She might have been trying to write help," Jimmy Barrett snapped. "The point is, at least we know she wasn't with Kluger." "But what was she doing in a dress shop?" Jack O'Neill asked. Jimmy Barrett's face registered disbelief. "I know it sounds crazy, but she was buying a wedding dress." "I've got to talk to that woman," Mike said. "She and her assistant are going to be here as fast as a squad car can deliver them," Jimmy Barrett told him. He pointed to the table. "There's a good chance they can pick out the guy your wife was with from those pictures." Clarence Gerber was astonished to see the change in the way things looked on the approach to Howville. In his day, it had been really rustic, with mountains and the hidden lakes. It never developed like most of the towns around. Pollution had set in years ago. Waste from factories had wrecked the swimming and fishing. But he wasn't prepared for the absolute desolation of the area. Houses were rotting away like they'd been abandoned forever. Junk and wrecked cars were piles of dust in the gullies off the road. Wonder why a fellow like Donnie Rubel would stick himself out here, Clarence thought. Memories long buried came back to him. Timber Lane wasn't directly off the highway. He should take that fork down the road a mile or two, go about 5 miles, then make a right on a dirt road that turned into Timber Lane. Clarence was pleased with a sunny day, pleased that his 11-year-old car was behaving so well. He had just had the oil changed, and even though it puffed a little on hills, just like me, he'd say, it was a good, heavy automobile. Not like the pieces of tin they call cars today and stick with price tags that in his day would have bought a mansion. Brenda's sisters had arrived before he'd even had a cup of coffee. They were glad to see him on his way, all full of the talk of that fellow who was nailing pictures of his missing wife all over the county. Clarence tried to picture Brenda missing. He chuckled. They'd never sue him for disturbing the peace hammering her picture around. He found the fork in the road. Stay to the right, he told himself. The sign for Timber Lane might be gone, but he'd know it when he saw it. The toaster was beside him on the seat. He'd remembered to bring a blank sheet of paper and an envelope. If Donnie wasn't home, he'd write a note. Maybe when he came back to pick up the toaster, Donnie and he could have a nice visit. Donnie sure must get lonely living around here. Didn't seem like there was a soul for miles around. The second screw was on the floor. The third one was beginning to work loose. Kay rotated her weight from side to side as she turned the handle of the screwdriver. She sensed some slack developing in it. Oh, God, please don't let it break. How long had he been gone? At least an hour? The phone had rung twice, and the caller received the message about the extended vacation, but Donnie did not call. She straightened up and brushed the perspiration from her forehead. A lightheadedness warned her that she was nearing exhaustion. Her legs were cramped. Hating to waste the time, she stood up and stretched. She turned, and her glance fell on the prom photo on the opposite wall. Sickened, she dropped back into the couch, and with a new burst of energy twisted the handle of the screwdriver. Suddenly, it was twirling in her hand. The third screw was free. She pulled it out and for the first time dared to hope that she might really have a chance. And then she heard it. The sound of a car, the squeal of brakes. No, no, no. Numbly, she laid the screwdriver on the floor and folded her hands. Let him see what she was doing. Let him kill her here and now. At first she thought she was fantasizing. It couldn't be. But it was. Somebody was thumping on the door. An old man's voice was calling. "Hey, anybody home?" The wailing of the siren in the squad car, the mad dash through the red lights, made the 10-mile ride from Pleasantwood to the O'Neill home in Jefferson Township seem an eternity to Vina Howard and her assistant Edna. "I saw that woman's picture last night," Vina reproached herself silently, "and all I worried about was that wallpaper. If only. It should have been obvious that there was something wrong. That fellow was in such a hurry. She insisted on trying on the dress, tried to stall by asking for other dresses. He opened the curtain of the dressing area as though he didn't trust her. And all I thought about was wallpaper." Jimmy Barrett cut Vina off when she tried to tell him all this at the O'Neill home. "Mrs. Howard, please. We believe that whoever abducted Kay Crandall may be in these pictures. Won't you study them now? You're sure he had red hair? Sure he had blue eyes?" "Absolutely," Vina said. "In fact, didn't we comment that he looked as though he just had his hair set?" Marion Martin got up from the table. "Sit here. I want to go over the list again." The terrible gnawing feeling that she had missed something. Why was it exploding inside her? She walked into the recreation room. Jean Pearson followed her. Virginia beckoned to her friends. They clustered on a semicircular couch across the room from Marion Martin and Jean Pearson. Mike stood at the table watching the earnest faces of the two middle-aged women who had seen Kay yesterday. Pleasantwood. He had been there. "What time did you say Kay was in your shop?" he asked Vina. "Around 3 o'clock? Maybe 1:15 or so?" "He had left this house yesterday at 3 o'clock and driven directly to Pleasantwood. He must have been in that town when Kay was there." The irony made him want to smash the wall with his fists. Jack O'Neill was stacking the prints after Vina and Edna rejected them. "You couldn't miss him," Vina told Jimmy Barrett. "All you have to do is look for that head of hair." She paused and picked up one picture. You know, it's funny. There's something about this one. What is? Jimmy Barrett snapped. There's something so familiar, Vina bit her lip in irritation. Oh, I'm wasting time. I know what it is. I'm looking at his picture. She pointed into the den where Jean Pearson was going over the reunion list with Marion. Edna took the picture from her. I see what you mean, but... Her voice trailed off. She continued to study the picture. It sounds silly, she said, but there's something about this man with the beard and dark glasses. In the den, Marion Martin was studying the list of alumni from a different viewpoint. She was searching for a name that for some reason she'd let slip by. She was just beginning to read the R list when something that Virginia was saying caught her attention. Remember how we all wanted to dress like Kay Wesley? She could have been prom queen when she chaperoned our prom. The prom, Marion Martin thought. That's what I've been trying to remember. Donnie Rubel, that odd, withdrawn boy who had such a crush on Kay. Her fingers raced down the page. He had signed up for the reunion, but she absolutely had not seen him in any of the pictures. That was why his name hadn't jumped out at her. Virginia, she asked, did any of you see Donnie Rubel at the reunion? Virginia looked at her classmates. I didn't see him, she said slowly. The others nodded in agreement. I've heard he has some kind of fix-it business, but he was always a loner, Virginia continued. I doubt if he bothered with anyone from school after we graduated. I think I'd have noticed him if he showed up for the reunion. Donnie Rubel, Jean Pearson interrupted. I'm sure I spoke to him. He even talked about his fix-it business. I asked if he'd speak on career day. It was right at the end of the picnic. He was in such a rush, he brushed me off. A little heavy-set, Marion snapped. Dark brown hair, brown eyes, just under 6 feet tall. No, this guy was pretty skinny. He had a beard and a damn little hair. In fact, I was surprised when he said he graduated only 8 years ago. Wait a minute. Jean Pearson stood up and ran a hand over the stubble of beard on his face. He's in one of those pictures with me. Let me get it. As one, Pearson, Marion Martin, Virginia, and her classmates raced from the den into the kitchen. Vina Howard had just grabbed the picture of Pearson and Donnie Rubel from her assistant's hand. He wore a wig, Vina shrieked. That's why we thought his hair looked so set. That's the man who came into my shop. Marion Martin, Virginia, and her friends stared at the thin, bearded stranger whom none of them had recognized. But Jean Pearson was shouting, That's Rubel! That's Rubel! Jimmy Barrett grabbed the list from Marion's hand. Donnie Rubel's address was next to his name. Timber Lane, Howville, he said. That's about 15 miles from here. The squad car's outside, he told Mike. Let's go. Clarence Gerber could not believe his ears. A woman's voice inside the house kept shouting at him to go for help, to phone the police, to tell him she was Kay Crandall. But suppose this was some kind of joke, or whoever was in there was on drugs or something. Clarence decided to try to take a look inside. But it was impossible to force the doors or shutters open. Don't waste time, Kay shouted. He'll be back any minute. Go for help. He'll kill you if he finds you here. Clarence gave one last pull at the shutter on the front window. It was bolted from the inside. Kay Crandall, he said aloud, now realizing why the name was familiar. That was the woman Brenda and her sisters were talking about this morning, the one whose husband was putting up posters. He'd better get to the police fast. Totally forgetting the toaster he'd set down on the porch, Clarence got back in his car and tried to coax speed from the aging engine as it wheezed and groaned up the twisting, bumpy dirt road. Kay heard the car pull away. Let him be in time. Let him be in time. How far was it to a phone? How long would it be before the police would get here? 10 minutes? 15? Half an hour? It might be too late. The fourth screw was still tightly in place. She could never work it free, but maybe. With 3 screws missing, she was able to use the screwdriver to force a corner of the metal plate away from the wall. She began to work the chain into the opening until she could grasp it in both hands. She arched her back, straightened her arms, and dragged the chain with her until she was rewarded by a crunching, ripping sound. Then she toppled backward as the metal plate separated from the wall, a chunk of aging plaster still clinging to it. Kay stood up, feeling the thin trickle of blood where her head had grazed a corner of the couch. The metal plate was heavy. She grasped it under one arm, looped the chain around her wrist, and started for the door. The familiar sound of the van driving into the clearing assaulted her ears. The excitement building in Donnie had reached fever pitch. He'd gotten rid of every single job. He'd explained to all of his customers that he was getting married and taking a long vacation. They'd looked surprised, then said how pleased they were for him, and they'd sure miss him. Said, let us know when you come back. He'd never come back. Everywhere he went, he kept seeing Kay's pictures. Mike Crandall was looking all over for her. Donnie felt for the gun in the inside pocket of his jacket. He'd kill Mike and Kay and himself before he'd lose her. But he didn't want to think about that. It was going to be fine. He had taken care of everything. He and Kay would get married in a few minutes and have their wedding brunch. He'd bought champagne and some stuff from the deli and a coconut cake that looked a little like a wedding cake. Then he'd go away. By tonight they'd be in Pennsylvania. He knew some good camping grounds. He fretted that he hadn't had time to buy a wedding gown for Kay, but the one she'd be wearing was really pretty. He reached the fork in the road. Another 10 minutes. He hoped Kay had memorized the wedding service. A June bride. He wished he'd thought of buying her flowers. He'd make it up to her. "Your husband will take care of you, Kay," he said aloud. The sun was so bright that even with the dark glasses he began to squint. Happy as the bride that the sun shines on today. He thought of Kay's sun-streaked hair. Tonight her head would be lying on his shoulder. Her arms would be around him. She'd be telling him how much she loved him. He heard before he saw the old car approaching. He had to pull to one side to let it pass. He got a glimpse of straggly white hair of some skinny little guy bent over the wheel. He had posted big no trespassing signs at the last bend on the road to his place, and anyhow nobody would bother going near a boarded-up house. Even so, Donnie felt his body tingle with anger. He didn't want people snooping around. Recklessly he pressed his foot on the accelerator. The van bounced along the twisted road. Straggly white hair. That car. He'd seen it before. As he brought the van to a halt, Donnie remembered yesterday's phone call. Clarence Gerber. That was the guy in the car. He jumped out of the van and started to run toward the house, then saw the toaster on the porch. He remembered the intense way Gerber was driving, like he was trying to make the car go faster. Gerber was going for the police. Donnie jumped back into the van. He'd catch up with Gerber. That old wreck he was driving couldn't go more than 40 miles an hour. He'd run him off the road. And then Donnie started the van, his mouth a thin, unforgiving line. And then he'd come back here and take care of Kay, who he knew now had betrayed him. Mike sat beside Jimmy Barrett in the back of the squad car, listening as the siren wailed and screeched. Kay is 15 miles away, 12 miles away, 8 miles away. God, please, if you exist, and I know you do, anything you want of me, I swear I'll do it, please, please, he thought. The landscape had changed sharply. Suddenly there were no longer in pretty suburban towns with well-kept lawns and budding rose bushes. The highway was surrounded by junk-filled gullies. The traffic had almost disappeared. Jimmy Barrett was studying a county road map. "I bet there hasn't been a street sign around here for 20 years, he muttered. "We'll hit a fork in the road about a mile," he barked to the patrolman at the wheel. "Veer to the right." They were almost at the fork when the driver jammed on the brakes to avoid hitting an old man who was swaying in the middle of the road, whose blood-encrusted hair clung to his head. In the gully below they could see a car burst into flames. Jimmy flung open the door, jumped out, and lifted the old man into the squad car. Clarence Gerber gasped, "He ran me off the road, Donnie Rubel. He's got Kay Crandall." With total disbelief, Kay heard the screeching of the tires as the van roared back down the road. Donnie must have seen the car the old man was driving, must have suspected something. Don't let Donnie hurt him, she pleaded to a God who seemed silent and far away. She hobbled to the door, pushed back the bolts, yanked the door open. If that old man was able to make it to the phone, she had a chance. She might be able to hide in the woods until help came. There was no use trying to run away. She could hardly move with the weight she was dragging. Some instinct made her pull the door closed behind her. If Donnie searched the house, it would give her a few additional minutes. Where should she try to hide? The brilliant sun was high in the sky, mercilessly finding its way into every opening between the branches of the shaggy, overgrown trees. He would be sure that she'd try for the road. She stumbled toward the woods on the other side of the clearing and headed for a cluster of maple trees. She had barely reached them when the van raced up the road again and stopped. She watched as, gun drawn, Donnie walked with deliberate, precise steps toward the house. "Trust me, I know where I'm going," Clarence Gerber told Jimmy Barrett, his voice uneven and quivering. "I was there 5 minutes ago." "The map says..." Jimmy Barrett clearly thought that Gerber was confused. "Forget the map," Mike ordered. "Do it his way." "It's kind of a shortcut," Clarence told them. It was hard to talk. He was feeling kind of dizzy. He could hardly believe it had happened. 1 minute he was driving, fast as he could push his good old car. The next he was being cut off, was being forced to the right. He'd barely had a glimpse of Donnie Rubel's van before he'd felt his wheels go off the road. Any other car and he'd have been killed. but he hung on to the wheel for dear life until the car stopped turning over. He'd smelled the gas and knew he had to get out fast. The driver's door was pinned to the ground, but he'd managed to push open the passenger door and then climb up the gully. "Down here," he told the driver. "Listen to me, will you? Now that next right, by the no trespassing sign. His place is in a clearing a couple of 100 yards down." Mike watched as Jimmy Barrett and the policeman drew their guns. "Kay, be there for me, be there. Be alive, please." The squad car burst into the clearing and came to a stop behind Donnie Rubel's fix-it van. Kay watched as Donnie opened the door and kicked it aside. She could almost feel his fury when he realized she was gone. The cabin was less than 30 yards from the clump of trees where she was hiding. Let him start looking on the road, she begged. An instant later, he was framed in the doorway, looking around wildly, the gun pointed straight in front of him. She hugged her arms against her sides. If he ever looked this way, the white eyelet dress would show through the leaves and branches. Any movement would cause the chain to rattle. She heard the sound of the approaching vehicle at the same moment she saw Donnie jump back into the house. But he did not close the door. Instead, he stood, waiting. The car pulled in behind the van. Kay saw the flashing red dome, a police car. Be careful, she thought, be careful. He doesn't care whom he kills. She watched as 2 uniformed policemen emerged from the car. They had parked on the side of the cabin. The windows were boarded up. There was no way they could see Donnie, who was now stepping out into the porch, a reckless caricature of a smile on his face. The back door of the squad car opened. 2 men got out. Mike! Mike was here! The policemen had drawn their guns. They were moving cautiously against the side of the house. Mike was with them. Donnie was tiptoeing across the porch. He would shoot when they turned the corner. He didn't care if he died. He would kill Mike! The clearing was utterly still. Even the squawks of the blue jays and the buzzing of the flies had stopped. Kay had a fleeting sense of the ending of the world. Mike had moved forward. It was only a few feet from the corner of the porch where Donnie waited. Kay stepped from behind the tree. "I'm here, Donnie," she called. She saw him running toward her, tried to press against the tree, felt the bullet graze her forehead, heard the sound of other guns exploding, saw Donnie crumble onto the ground. Then Mike was running toward her. Sobbing with joy, Kay stumbled toward the clearing and into the arms that were rushing to enfold her. Jimmy Barrett was not a sentimental man, but his eyes were suspiciously moist as he watched Kay and Mike, silhouetted against the trees, holding each other as if they'd never let go. One of the policemen was bending over Donnie Rubel. "He's gone," he told Jimmy. The other cop had wrapped a bandage around Clarence Gerber's head. "You're a tough one," he told Clarence. "Mostly lacerations as far as I can see. We'll get you to a hospital." Clarence was absorbing every detail to tell Brenda and her sisters. The way Kay Crandall had tried to draw Donnie Rubel's fire. The way Donnie had run toward her, shooting at her. The way that young couple were holding on to each other, now crying in each other's arms. He looked around so that later he could describe the cabin. The women would want to know every detail. His glance spotted something on the porch, and he hurried over to claim it. Even though he was a hero, it would be just like Brenda to remind him that he had forgotten to bring the toaster home.